talk about fears. Let's talk about love. Yeah, I got fears, but I ain't got no love. Yes, I got fears. Fear of plane crash. Fear of car crash. Oh, fear of sex. Fear of alcohol.
So as it's coming closer to Halloween, I thought it would be appropriate maybe to talk a little about Amityville Horror and the true story behind it, which is the 6 murders committed allegedly by Butch Defeo, Ronnie Defeo Jr. Very, very interesting case. Amityville Horror haunted house aside, if we strictly look at just the murders that happened in that house at, let's see how good my memory is, 112 Ocean Ave. Definitely Ocean Ave, not sure if it's 112. I think the address has been changed since. But this is a perfect case for solved or unsolved, because it's been alleged for a long time, at least in the general public, that Butch Defeo, who I believe was 23 at the time, shot and killed 6 members of his family, his mom and dad, and 4 of his siblings, on, I believe it was November 13th, 1974, the year I was born. So, why is it solved or unsolved? Well, new evidence has come to light a few years ago that maybe the real murderer of at least part of the family was his younger sister, Dawn. So, in this family structure, you have Ronnie Defeo Sr., you have the mother, who is, I think she was Italian, they're both Italian, and they're both connected through family to the mafia. Then you have the rest of the siblings, the younger siblings, 2 boys, 2 girls, Dawn Defeo and Butch. The family dynamics in that house was absolutely crazy from my research. Ronnie Defeo, the dad, was a typical, he was an abuser. He was an abuser, not sexual abuser. He was a physical abuser, verbal abuser of his family. He was the head of the house, and he made sure that everybody knew that. He would oftentimes abuse his wife. I believe her name was Louisa. So much so that she would have to wear long sleeve clothing while she's sitting out at the pool by at least one account. He was a big man. He was almost 300 pounds, portly, not muscular. You could say he was fat. But he did not seem to get along very well with any members of his family inside that house. A lot of verbal abuse, a lot of physical abuse. He knocked his wife down a set of steps. All this taking place in there, and the 23-year-old Butch Defeo bears the brunt of it. So by that I mean he's the man of the house, the second man in the house, and he has to stick up for everybody else. But he gets the verbal lashing, he gets the beatings as well. But by all accounts, he was a spoiled kid. By that I mean his dad came from money, and I believe he worked at, Ronnie Defeo Sr. worked at a car dealership and was somewhat financed through his wife's father, Mike, who had ties to the mafia. It has been alleged that Ronnie Defeo Sr., gave Ronnie Defeo Jr. $500 a week spending money. He did work at the car dealership with his dad. He didn't really have a title. Okay, he just did whatever needed done at that time. But Ronnie Defeo Jr., and I'm going to start calling him Butch, one, so we don't confuse Ronnie Defeo Sr., Ronnie Defeo Jr., and that's what everybody called him, was Butch. Butch was a drug user, and he would oftentimes, smoke weed, heroin, from what I understand, coke. Nothing was really off limits with him. But so did, according to Butch, his sister, Dawn. Dawn had a new boyfriend. Dawn was, I should have looked and seen exactly how old she was, but I'm going to say she was in her late teens. 19 maybe. And she was a heavy-set girl. And her dad used to pick on her about that. Well, she got a boyfriend, and the boyfriend and her were going to run away to Florida because of the abuse in that household. It was just not a good environment to be raised in. Mostly because of Ronnie Defeo Sr. He was the problem. Well, Butch, after years of this torment and abuse, had enough of it. And on the night of the murders, allegedly, Butch was in that house, sitting upstairs in a television room, watching a war movie, when everybody went to bed. While the movie is playing, Ronnie Butch says a figure, but all he could see was the black hands, handed him a .35 caliber rifle, and he went and systematically went to each bedroom, starting with the parents, and murdered them. Now that has been the narrative for many years. Much like Jeffrey McDonald's case, just like Chris Watts' case, other cases where a family is annihilated by one of their own, you can't believe it. Again, we believe it more now because we've seen it happen in the past. But back then, 1974, not heard of. Very rare. Butch goes into a local drinking establishment that he had been to many times the next night and says, "Come quick. I think my mother and father are shot." Now that's interesting to me. And this will come into my assessment a little later, but he only says his mother and father are shot. He doesn't say anything about the siblings. They pile in, according to the barkeep, they pile into Butch's car. They drive. They discover the carnage. Police are called. Investigation begins. First thing they do is they take Butch into custody. Not for what you think. Not for the murders. But for his protection. Now why? Well, because he said that the mob did it. And he named a specific guy. So, they took him into custody to keep him safe. Through the course of his stay at the police station, he eventually confesses to the murders. He's arrested. There's a trial. At the trial, it is brought up that he is going to plead insane. The insanity defense. So how do they play that up? They play that up by saying a demon, black hands, handed him the rifle. But that leads to the Amityville Horror and 9 movies and countless books. Whether that's true or not is for another discussion. But we are looking strictly at Butch's involvement in these murders. When police were going through the house, they noticed a .35 caliber rifle box in Butch's bedroom. It was empty. The ballistics that were there, the criminologists and the CSI team stated that a .35 caliber they had recovered had gone through one of the parents, through the mattress, and was laying on the floor. By looking at that, he said that's .35 caliber. So they knew that they were looking for a .35 caliber weapon. Well, they find the empty box in Butch's thing. Okay, well, where's the gun? That almost sealed his fate. At the police station, he confessed. He took them to where he discarded the rifle. Scuba divers recovered it. Also, some clothing, a scabbard for the rifle, and a holster for another gun, which is also going to be key. Shell casings or live ammunition and a storm drain. And they recovered all this. Now, how did they recover all this? Through Butch's confession. Okay, so that's important. They go to trial. It's a pretty clear cut and dry case. He tries the insanity defense. He gets on stand to testify for himself. And he eventually says, I killed him. Once I started, I couldn't stop. Sealed his fate. Guilty. 6 counts of murder. So through the years, Butch has lost all of his appeals. In his appeals, in one of his appeals, he made up a person. And said, this person was with me when I murdered my dad and my mom. That's it. He does say he changes his story, not only about this made-up person. So the police get this appeal and they look for this made-up person. He never existed. It was just a lie. He was basically trying to, win his appeal. It didn't work. They found it out. He changes his story to say, listen, my sister Dawn is the one who killed the kids. Then I killed her. So what he says happens. Now, this is from 1974 till he just died, I believe, just a few years ago. The story he tells is that the abuse in the house had taken the toll. And his sister came down and was egging him on down in the basement. Come on, we got to kill him. We have to, he's the problem, blah, blah, blah. They got drunk. She got high. He got high with her. Finally, she goes up. She grabs the rifle, brings it down to him. That's the black hands that was handing him the rifle. They both go up. They go into mom and dad's room. Opens the door. He hears a shot. He thinks he's been shot. But it's actually his sister shooting from a handgun. Remember the holster that's found in the storm drain? In an instant, he turns with the rifle and shoots his mother. He then shoots his father and the variation of how this took place has changed. So, but that's the gist of it. He then leaves for a period of time. He doesn't know how long. When he comes back, he goes up to Dawn's bedroom. She has already killed the other kids, her siblings. He then kills her. That's one version. I believe that's the last version that he stuck to. There was a version in between there where he was accompanied by two friends. One's name was Augie, and the other, I want to say, was Bobby. Augie, they were all down in the basement. Dawn comes down. She starts saying, we got to kill him, blah, blah, blah. Augie chickens out. He leaves. Bobby goes upstairs and starts playing the piano to try, and this is Butch telling the story, and I'm like, what is he playing the piano for at 2 a.m? What is going on? Apparently, the dad and mom were arguing in the bedroom. Bobby did not want them to hear that argument, so he started playing the piano. They come upstairs, they hear the argument, all three of them, Dawn, Butch, and Bobby, walk up the steps, open the door. They get into an argument. Dad starts coming at him. He shoots. They have a handgun with him. Bobby shoots. They kill the mother. That's another story. Now, I watched the interviews with Butch. Very New Yorker. Very Long Islandy. Very much so a liar. Okay? I caught him in numerous lies right off the bat. Different interviews. When he says he left the house, he was listening to music. Another time he says, I left the house and it was silent. I didn't even have the music on. Now, those are little things, okay? It's been, 45 years. Is he going to remember whether he was playing music or not? Yeah, I don't know. But his story changes so often that I just have a hard time believing. The truth's in there. Okay? So what you need to do is take those stories, look at the crime scene photos, look at the evidence. Ballistics will tell you the story. Okay? It will tell you whether a handgun was used or a rifle. But his story about a handgun being used is not in the official story. They believe he went systematically with the rifle. I believe that too. But the handgun holster being discarded is troublesome. You don't discard that unless there's a reason to do that. So that leaves some credibility to his story in my eyes. Now, let me tell you why. I'm going to go back to when he jumped into the bar and said, my mom and father's been shot. There's two reasons he says that. One, it's because that's the truth. And that's only people he killed was his mom and dad. And he's admitted to that. And he doesn't know about the kids. But I don't believe that. I believe it's the second reason. And it's the reason he's never admitted that I saw, except where it mattered most, at trial. Everything after that, he never admitted to killing his brothers and sisters. Neighbors said there was absolutely no way he could have killed them. Not so fast, my friend. We've seen in other cases where people say that, and it's been proven that they have killed him. Now, did he do it or did Dawn do it? Again, evidence will tell you that. Crime scene photos will tell you that. Now, when I looked at the crime scene photos, I saw one thing that stuck out to me that was odd. And that was, it seemed that every member of the family was laying on their stomachs and had their arms underneath the pillow in some variation. Everybody sleeps different, right? At different times of the night. So why are they all face down? Could they have been drugged and placed there? Well, toxicology reports, I think, will show that they were not. Is it happenstance? Is it just coincidental? Very well could be. Is it something supernatural? Same with the time of death. 3:15. That's the established time of death. That's what all the Amityville Horror movies show. It's just a movie, right? Butch says, I remember walking up those steps. And I looked at the clock. And it was 5 minutes till 1. Well, in other interviews, he said it was around 3. So what do you believe, right? Again, I think that when you look at the crime scene photos, especially the one with Dawn being killed in her bed and the mother and dad's bedroom, I think those are the keys. That's where the evidence needs to be focused on. By outward appearances, it looks exactly like it is. Butch Defeo killed them all, just like he said he did at trial. And once he stopped, he couldn't, or once he started, he couldn't stop. Well, what do you believe? Do you believe it was Butch acting alone? Do you believe it was Butch acting in a co-conspirator role with his sister Dawn? Or co-conspirator role with his sister Dawn and his friend Bobby? Which one's true? Well, I think that we can deduce this very easily. If he was in cahoots with Dawn to do this, why didn't he mention that at trial? Wouldn't that be the time to mention it? That goes back to why at the bar did he say he just killed his mom and dad? And it's why 50 years later, for the past 50 years, he's never said that he's killed his siblings. Why? Because there is remorse there. In his mind, he does not want to go there. His dad, he's got no problem saying he killed his dad. In fact, he has no problem saying he killed his mother, although there's some regret there. But why? What did his mom do to him? His mom stuck up for her husband. Why? He was a terrible husband. He beat them. Well, sometimes there's many different names for it. There's battered woman syndrome. There's Stockholm syndrome. When you are accustomed to something, and it's the way it is, sometimes that's the way it is. especially in that house. Butch Defeo could not understand how his mother could stick up for him after he had beat her, thrown her down the steps, abused the children. That irritated Butch. I'm not making that up. That's him saying that, and it's my training and experience that also says that. I've seen it hundreds of times. So to him, he really didn't. I can't say this for sure. I was going to say he really didn't want to kill his mom. I don't know that. I'm not in his head. But I know that did not bother him as much as killing the kids. And I do believe more than likely, right now, Ronnie Defeo killed them all. It's like Robert Durst said, do what? Kill them all, of course. Butch Defeo admitted this at trial. What I want to do is I want to look more in depth at the crime scene photos, especially of Dawn's room and the ballistics in the mom and dad's room. Also, I'm intrigued about the cover, the blanket that's pulled up over Dawn. If he shot her in bed, simple enough. That blanket should have a hole in it. If that blanket does not, now we have an issue. Unless, of course, she was shot one time in the face. I would want to see where that blood spatter is in that room. If it's there, surrounded by the bed, by all accounts, he did it. If it's somewhere else, if something doesn't match up, well, then we have to look at his other versions of the story. Is Butch Defeo innocent? Absolutely not. He absolutely killed at least his dad, and more than likely his mom. And by his own admittance, one way or another, he killed Dawn. Whether she was asleep in bed and didn't know that it took place, or there was an altercation between the co-conspirators. Should not be that hard. Now, I did read somewhere that Dawn supposedly had gun particles, or not gun particles, gunpowder particles on her dress. But there was no stippling, which means the gun barrel was not placed up against the skin. It had to be from a distance. That doesn't mean you wouldn't have gunpowder residue on your shirt if it was an up close. But if it was from a distance, that could indicate that Butch was telling the truth and she fired that weapon that night. So that's very interesting to me. So I definitely have to look into that further. Now, if you want to get into the other side of this a little bit, where Butch claims that George and Kathleen Lutz, who were the occupants of that house that started the Amityville Horror saga, Kathleen and George Lutz actually approached Butch's attorney, William Weber, and made up the whole Amityville Horror story. It was a con. And it was done for two reasons. One, to try to get Butch out of jail and off of these charges by saying he was possessed by a demon and the house was haunted. And also for George Lutz and Kathleen Lutz to make money. That is a very interesting scenario, which I'm certainly going to dive into deeper the closer to Halloween we get. So how could this whole Amityville Horror story be a crock of shit? Amazing, isn't it? My whole life I hear that music. Doo 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 doo. Ugh, gave me the creeps. I hated it. Jody the pig with the big eyes. They're saying it was actually just named off of the neighbor's fat Siamese cat that used to come up onto the landing of the roof and look in the windows. And Butch hated that cat. He used to call the cat a fat pig. So they took those words and said, hey, we'll say it's a pig with glowing eyes. Man, the whole thing could be a hoax. And William Weber, the attorney, went on record to say it absolutely was. We made up the whole Amityville Horror thing. That leads into Annabelle, The Conjuring, because Ed and Lorraine Warren supposedly went into the Amityville house and felt all these spirits. And how could they do that if it was all made up to begin with, right? Oh boy. That's going to be a deep, deep dive on that one. But for right now, Amityville Horror, Butch Defeo executing his entire family on November 13th, 1974 with a .35 caliber rifle. Solved or unsolved? Unsolved. Because I'm not convinced that Dawn in some way wasn't involved. Until I figure that out, it's unsolved. Amityville Horror aspect of it, definitely unsolved. I'll have to look into it further. Crazy, right? Butch Defeo. Whew. Talking about that, an evil person that can do those things to kill innocent people. And think about this, and I'm glad I thought of this right before I ended this video. A .35 caliber rifle is loud. Nobody in that house heard those shots? If they did, wouldn't they be positioned differently in bed? Maybe they even got out of bed to come here. Maybe not the kids. I don't know, the younger kids. Wouldn't have Dawn gotten up out of bed? What was that? 6 shots. There was no evidence of a silencer, although I think it's a possibility that one could have been used. But because that's, again, supernatural. Not so fast, my friend. I'm a firm believer that everything can be figured out. You just have to take the time. Albert Einstein once said, and it was the best quote, and I love it. Well, he had 2 great quotes, but one that I liked is, it's not that I'm smarter than everyone else. I just stick with the problem longer. I love that. Second one he said, doesn't have relevance to this, but in life it does, and I subscribe to it. He said, I treat everybody the same way. I don't care whether you're the janitor or you're the CEO of the company. I treat you with the same amount of respect. And I like that because that's what I do as well. But I digress. This was about the Amityville Horror. This is about Butch Defeo shooting 6 of his family members on November 13th, 1974. And right now, solved or unsolved, this is unsolved till I do a deeper dive. And I hope to get to that for Halloween for you. Okay. Subscriptions keep going up, so keep spreading the word, and we'll keep doing these videos. All right? Main's out.
All fear of